Hello everyone, this is Steven, and today I'm coming to you with another one of my deck tech videos. But before I do that, I just wanted to thank everybody that's given me such amazing and constructive feedback for this channel. Recently I did a legacy or a modern video on blue-black fairies that just far and away exceeded my expectations of the number of views and comments and likes that I could get for my channel. When I originally started my channel, it was just going to be a way for me to post videos to YouTube instead of to my Facebook site so that my friends can see the kind of deck ideas that I would, normally post among my, the groups that I'm on Facebook. And I was just, like I said, so overwhelmed by the, support, by the views, by the likes and the comments, and I was really inspired to kind of turn what was just going to be a extremely side project YouTube channel into something that I could maybe put a little bit more effort into. One of the nice things about YouTube is there's a little analytics page that tells you the number of views that you get, the amount of time that people actually spend watching your video as opposed to how long the video is. And one of the things I'm going to be doing now for future videos, after reading comments and seeing some of the view times, is I'm going to be posting the deck list in the description. The second thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing timestamps for my videos, and how I'm going to implement that is, some people that I've got read in comments, they like the learn aspect of the deck tech where it's, I can sit and, watch your deck tech for about 30 minutes and really get in deep into how the deck works. But there's also some people that I just want to see what the deck is and hear your very quick thoughts. I don't need to watch the entire 30 minutes. So for the future, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be splitting my deck tech into two different sections. The first section is going to be just sort of a quick 8 to 10 minutes. Here's the deck. Not really too much about why the specific cards are in there and the really deep nuts and bolts about what those cards do in relation to the format. The second half of the videos are going to be, all right, now that we've gone over what the deck tech is, this is going to be, why do I run these cards? Why do I run these numbers? These are some cards that you don't often see in Legacy, or maybe people that are, jumping in from Modern or other formats, and, just get a little bit more help about some of the more nuances of the specific cards that are in this deck. So anyways, that's going to be how this video goes. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start out by saying I'm doing a deck tech on Legacy Punishing Jund, and I'm going to start out by giving a little advice about how people can go from Modern into Legacy. I get asked all the time by people, Steven, what is a good budget deck to play in Legacy? And you typically always hear kind of the same three decks: Burn, Manaless, Dredge, and sort of the high end of the budget decks now that we've gotten a lot of the reprints in Wasteland and Karakas and whatnot is the Death and Taxes deck. The second way that I would answer how to build a budget deck in Legacy is, what do you play in Modern and how can you upgrade that into Legacy? And in my opinion, one of the best decks that translates well in Modern and also translates well to Legacy is Jund. So if you play Jund in Modern, be it the sort of the traditional Jund that plays, Dark Confidants and Lilianas and Tarmogoyfs, or if you, used to have that deck and now you're playing the, the new, Death Shadow Jund, be that as it may, you already have about 80% of the Legacy deck as is, and a lot of the cards that you would need to supplement that in terms of the creatures and spells are really not all that expensive. And what's the expensive part of getting from Modern into Legacy? It's the mana base. But one of the nice things about Jund is you play with some of the cheapest dual lands. You're not playing blue, and so you get to run Badlands, which is like the second or third cheapest dual land of all of the original dual lands, and then Bayou, which is like, in the middle of the pack. And one of the nice things about Jund is you can also play, there's a lot of lands that you can play that aren't dual lands and, you know, can fit the role of shock lands. And what do I mean by that is, you know, there's a lot of, like, because you want to play basic lands in Jund, you can find some of these, like, you know, you can play a Blackleaf Cliffs in Jund, and it won't necessarily hurt you that badly. Also, you can just play shock lands in Legacy. You know, one of the things about Legacy that I hear all the time from people is, you know, it's a very fast format, but it also isn't. And when you lose or win a game, it's typically not going to be decided by assuming you play shock lands, that 2 life that you would have to play. So if you play a Blood Crypt instead of a Badlands, 9 times out of 10, the game isn't going to be decided because you lost 2 life because you played a Blood Crypt coming into play untapped. I mean, just look at all of the decks that you might be running against, you know, Sneak and Show or Storm. You know, that 2 life is irrelevant. It's what cards did you draw? Did you get your Dark Confidants on time? Did you get your Thoughtseizes on time? Or did you draw too much hand disruption? Or did you draw too much, you know, creature removal? And same thing for, you know, Death and Taxes. You know, if you lose 2 life because you played a Blood Crypt and you just didn't draw your Lilianas and you got too much hand disruption, it doesn't really matter that, you know, you lost 2 life as opposed to, you know, playing a Badlands or a Blood Crypt. So you can start out building your deck and, you know, play your shock lands and, you know, spend a couple $100 here and there. And all of a sudden, now you've got this really nice Legacy deck that, for the price of what you would have had to pay to build a budget deck in Legacy, you can just have the full-on experience of playing a, you know, quote-unquote real Legacy deck. So, yeah, I'm going to just start out with Jund, and now that I've shared why, you know, I think Jund is a good deck to transfer from Modern to Legacy, let's go into the nuts and bolts of the deck. So, quickly, we're going to start out with the mana base. I play 8 fetch lands. I play 2 Bloodstained Mire. I play 2 Wooded Foothills, and I play 4 Verdant Catacombs. I'll go into a little bit more of the numbers of why you'd want to run those later on in the video, but that's just the amount of fetch lands I play. I play 8. I play 2 basic lands. I play a forest and a swamp. And then these are the dual lands that I run. I run 3 Badlands, and I run 2 Bayous. And then I play 1, 2, 3, 4 Wastelands. And then I play 1, 2, 3, 4 Grove of the Burnwillows. So, yeah, that's the mana base for Jund. I will, later on in the video, go into specifics about why I run this configuration of numbers, but that's the mana base as it is. Next, with any Jund deck, because we are not playing blue, we need to be able to interact with our opponents' spells that they would cast that could beat us because we don't have Force of Will. So I run 1, 2, 3, 4 Thoughtseizes. I play 2 Inquisition of Kozileks, and I play 2 Hymn to Tourachs. Again, I will go into, at the end of the video, why I play this configuration. I haven't always played Inquisitions in the main, but with the banning of Sensei's Divining Top and the rise of what I would call unfair combo, I think it's a little bit more important to have ways to interact with your opponent's hand as opposed to just getting the raw 2-for-1 advantage that Hymn to Tourach gives you. Next is going to be our creature removal suite. I play 1 Lightning Bolt. I play 3 Abrupt Decay. I play 3 Punishing Fire. And then the new addition to the deck is 1 Kolaghans Command. This is a number that I have come to recently. I may or may not change this configuration. You know, I see a lot of people not playing Lightning Bolts and playing 4 Punishing Fire. Kolaghans Command could be a second Lightning Bolt, but this is just the number that I have right now. This is something that changes, not too widely among decks that you see. The Kolaghans Command is a little bit unique to how I'm playing the deck. I'll get into a little bit more of that later on. I'll just go out and say I don't know that Fatal Push is where you want to be at in Punishing Jund and Legacy, because I think it's a little bit too important to interact with Planeswalkers. And so I would just say Lightning Bolt is the best option opposed to Fatal Push. We're going to go into the creatures. I play 4 Deathrite Shaman. You kind of can't play this deck without Deathrite Shaman. It's so good at accelerating you. I think the second most important creature, and it might even be the most important creature in this deck, is Dark Confidant. Because you're not running Brainstorm, you need ways to get just raw card advantage. And, the games you win and lose are often, was I able to play a Dark Confidant on curve and let it survive long enough for me to be able to just out card advantage my opponent. 4 Tarmogoyfs, this is the, bread and butter beater of the format. It's just as good as you can get for 2 mana. And then finally, we get to play the banned, but should be banned card in Modern, and Bloodbraid Elf. This is just an awesome card. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy playing this deck so much, is you get to play the old cards that were banned in the original Modern, so you get to play your Deathrite Shamans and you get to play your Bloodbraid Elf. So this is the creature base for Punishing Jund. Up next, we'll go into the Planeswalkers. I'm playing 4 Lilianas of the Veil. Again, if you know how Modern works, Liliana is just as devastating in Legacy as it is in Modern. When you are able to, turn it out on turn 2 with a Deathrite Shaman and, kill their Delver's Secrets, and they don't have a way to interact with Liliana, and now you can just start ticking up. You now have a way to uncounterably kill whatever creatures they play, and whatever Brainstorm or Force of Will kind of interaction they have in their hand, they're now having to decide, what cards do I want to keep to fight it. And, not every deck plays Abrupt Decay or a way to kill Liliana of the Veil. Swords to Plowshares has kind of gone back to being the most popular removal spell, and Swords to Plowshares doesn't interact as favorably with Liliana as Abrupt Decay and Lightning Bolt does. So a lot of decks, if you play Liliana against them, most decks now don't have ways to interact with Liliana anymore. The new addition that I have added to this deck, and this is purely a kind of something I've stumbled upon in the last couple of months, is Chandra, Torch of Defiance. This could be a Lightning Bolt, or I would typically say this would be a Lightning Bolt, but I love the way that this card interacts with Legacy right now, because it's something that you don't often get to see in Legacy. I'll just quickly say what it does. So +1, exile the top card of your library. You may cast that card. If you don't, Chandra, Torch of Defiance deals 2 damage to each opponent. This is a way to actually deal damage to Jace the Mind Sculptor. You're not going to be doing the +1 to add red to your mana pool, but sometimes you can play this and cast the Punishing Fire if you want to. The -3, deal 4 damage to target creature. That kills most creatures in the format. The creatures it doesn't kill are Tarmogoyf and Gurmag Angler and whatever Sneak and Show is going to be putting in. But the -3 is just a way to kill most creatures. And then the ultimate is an actual sort of win condition against some of the grindy matchups. But it's just a card I've really kind of fallen in love with lately. And then last but not least is Sylvan Library. This is sort of our way to just pay life to get, again, raw card advantage. How it works is your draw step, you get to look at 3 cards, and then you can choose one of them and not pay any life, or you can pay 4 life for each card that you want to keep after the first one. So essentially what it is pay 8 life to draw 3 cards instead of, drawing 1 card. Or you can use it like a Sensei's Divining Top and just pick the best of the top 3 cards of your library. It works very well with Dark Confidant because you can put cards that you want to not lose life off of as much with your Dark Confidant. So you can, put the land on top that you'll be getting with your Dark Confidant so you don't lose any life, and then the second one that you're going to be drawing can be your most expensive card. So it's a way to kind of mitigate the potential downside of Dark Confidant's losing life for drawing cards ability. You can, put a land on top, and then you can put your Bloodbraid Elf underneath that, so that way your Dark Confidant next turn will be getting you your land, and you don't have to lose 4 life to the Bloodbraid Elf. Finally, I'm just going to do a very quick sideboard. This is just a speculative sideboard. It could be a lot of different things, but I would typically say 10 or 12 of these cards are going to be pretty stock for Jund right now. Grafdigger's Cage interacts very well with Storm and Elves, which has really picked up in popularity. Diabolic Edict is a way for you to not lose on the spot to the Show and Tell decks. You can Diabolic Edict a Emrakul before it gets to attack and annihilate, and you can Diabolic Edict Grizzlebrand is a little bit harder because they can draw 7 and get a Force of Will to counter this. So typically Diabolic Edict is going to how you get your the Emrakul. Diabolic Edict is also a great way to interact with True Name Nemesis. And speaking of True Name Nemesis, we also run 1 Golgari Charm. This kills True Name Nemesis. I have won a couple of times back when Miracles was around. I would bring this in so that I could kill a counterbalance, and it also can save you from a Supreme Verdict. I don't know if that's going to be something you're going to be wanting to think of, but the regenerate each creature you control is Supreme Verdict decks ever pick up in popularity that also happen to play enchantments. This is something you can maybe think about. But typically Golgari Charm is going to be coming in against Elves and Death and Taxes or the True Name Nemesis control decks. I run a Pernicious Deed. Again, this is just going to be more ways to deal with creatures. It does not hit Planeswalkers, but, so be it. Pernicious Deed is also really good at killing, decks that play Chalice of the Void because it costs 0. So, any decks that play a lot of creatures or rely on artifacts and enchantments to win, Pernicious Deed is really good against. This is the most flex spot of the flex spot cards in my sideboard. I'm playing a Kolaghans Command, but it could basically be anything. Up next, I play a couple of Surgical Extractions, sort of self-explanatory, against lands, against Reanimator. Or Dredge is typically what I'm going to bring it in. I almost never bring in Surgical Extraction to just value somebody's Brainstorm that I Thoughtseize. I think that's a pretty big waste of time. I only like Surgical Extraction if it's going to be a high payoff card that really neuters a deck, as opposed to I'm going to be cute and take your I'm going to Wasteland your Underground Sea and Surgical all of your Underground Seas. That's a little bit too cute for me. I'm not that kind of player. An Engineered Plague, good against Elves, good against the Death and Taxes. You can also bring it in to name Merfolk against True Name Nemesis. Toxic Deluge is our 3-mana sweeper. Pretty much unconditionally kill anything, even stuff with Indestructible, because it's -X/-X and you pay life to that. So typically you're going to be Toxic Deluging for 3, is kind of the maximum I've ever... 3 is kind of the high end, unless you're playing against Tarmogoyf decks. You might have to go up to 5, but typically Toxic Deluge is going to be naming for 3. Chains of Mephistopheles. I'm going to go into this in the latter portion of the deck, about specifically what this card does. This is a very expensive pet card that I play to sort of let my Jund deck kind of really compete with the big boys in Legacy. It's a $400 card, and it's a very powerful card. Basically what it does is it makes Brainstorm decks really, really bad because it really hits Brainstorm. I'm not going to go too much into it in this portion of the deck, but I would say look up a video on what Chains of Mephistopheles does. If you do not own Chains of Mephistopheles, which most people don't, I would just suggest playing additional Duresses or Pyroblast to supplement Chains, because typically you're going to be bringing in chains against, blue decks, and a lot of blue decks are also going to be like the control decks or the combo decks. So I would just say, if you don't own chains, play 1 additional Duress, 1 additional Pyroblast. And that's just my sideboard for now. I hope you enjoy this video, and I'm going to be now posting a timestamp on about the 20-minute mark now for the people that want to get a little bit more in-depth on the deck. All right, so going back to the mana base, one of the things I talked about was my fetch lands that I played. So I play 4 Verdant Catacombs. 4 Verdant Catacombs is, I think, required because you need a way to fetch the basic lands in your deck, the swamp and the forest. So you can mix and match with the other fetch lands, but Verdant Catacombs is a mandatory 4 of. After that, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to be doing. Right now I'm running 2 Bloodstained Mire and 2 Wooded Foothills. Other things I have seen people do are play 3 Wastelands and play a 9th fetch land. Totally okay with that. The mana base in Jund is like 90% stock of what I've shown you, but this is, I think, a pretty good list. And then again, I'm playing the 2 basics. I have seen people play 2 swamps and 1 forest. I think if Blood Moon really picks up in popularity by the Sneak and Show, or just, the red deck kind of wins decks, I think that's something you can think of, but it's pretty easy to fetch a swamp. The other thing you can do is, if you see Blood Moon picking up in popularity, is to play 3 Bloodstained Mire or even 4 Bloodstained Mire and then 1 Wooded Foothills. Right now, I don't know that Blood Moon is a bane of the format at this point, but if that's something that I'm seeing happening, I will play fetch lands that will allow me to get that swamp, because once you have swamp and a Deathrite Shaman in play, things kind of solve themselves in terms of Blood Moon. Swamp and Deathrite Shaman really let you cast just about everything in your deck at that point. I'm playing 2 Bayous and 3 Badlands, and again, going back to the why you should play this version if you want to build a budget deck, you can get Badlands on TCG Player for around $60 if you wait for sales. Star City Games, Channel Fireball, they host like summer sales every once in a while, and you can typically get Badlands for anywhere from $50 to $80, depending on the quality that you want your Badlands to be. But again, everything that I showed you in the creature package is stuff that you would have if you played Jund in Modern, outside of Deathrite Shaman and Bloodbraid Elf. But Deathrite Shaman and 3 Bloodbraid Elves is going to cost you, man, I wish I knew off the top of my head what Deathrite Shaman costs. I think it's like, it can't be more than like $10. And Bloodbraid Elves are like, a couple dollars at most. So, we're really talking about $50 worth of creatures, and then, $500 in lands. And so for $550, you can have a modern deck that's really good, Death Shadow Jund or traditional Jund. And now you get to play a tier 2 deck in Legacy. And, tier 2 in Legacy is a lot different than tier 2 in Modern. Tier 2 in Legacy, there is a huge gap in what can win and lose in Legacy. And I think a lot of people, get kind of caught up in, what does it mean to be a tier 2 deck in Legacy? And I think the reason why Jund isn't as popular in Legacy is because it's not a brainstorm deck. And, a lot of people like to play something a little bit different in Legacy than they would in Modern or other formats. And so, you just get to play with brainstorm. So you don't see a ton of non-brainstorm decks in Legacy. And when you do, they all tend to kind of be like the same kind of thing. Is Jund like the best deck in the format? Would I recommend is it the meta beater? No, but I think Jund is a legitimate 11 and 4 Grand Prix deck. If you build your sideboard right, it's a deck that I think could easily top 8 if you metagame very well with your sideboard and make a couple of correct called shots in the main deck. So yeah, this is just the mana base. I think this is probably the preferred way to do it, is to do 2 Bayous and 3 Badlands. Badlands is very important because you need of the ability to cast your Punishing Fires. And there's a little bit more red in the deck than there is green. So yeah. Grove of the Burnwillows. I'm not going to go too much into how it interacts with Punishing Fire, but how it works is you can tap it to add red or green to your mana pool, and then each opponent gains a life. And so how it works is if you have Punishing Fires in your graveyard, you can tap a Grove of the Burnwillows for red, and it allows you to return any number of Punishing Fires that are in your graveyard now for the cost of additional red. So you can use that red from the Grove to return Punishing Fires from your graveyard. And most decks in Legacy that are trying to play you fairly are not going to be able to weather the storm of just getting over and over Punishing Fired throughout the game. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I would suggest playing Jund, is because it has a very, very high win rate against fair decks like Delver. I don't know about the check pile deck, but, again, Punishing Fire really allows you to just weather the storm against most fair decks. I mean, it's just... the most important creature to get when you're playing Grove of the Willow Punishing Fire is the Deathrite Shaman. And if you can manage their Deathrite Shaman so that they can't exile it, it's really hard for them to be able to now play creatures that are going to just survive Lilianas and Abrupt Decays and Punishing Fires over and over and over again. So yeah. Next, we're going to go a little bit more in-depth into the hand disruption. I said it earlier in the deck tech, 4 Thoughtseize is pretty stock. In the past, you've typically seen 4 Thougtseize for him to Tourach. I think now, because Storm and Sneak and Show are a lot more popular, I like to have a little bit of extra, I want to specifically get that one card as opposed to cross my fingers and hope that the 2-for-1 can bail me out. I still play him to Tourach because it's a great 2-for-1 against fair decks, but every time that you play him to Tourach against Show and Tell or whatever combo decks that are not a like Storm, you want him a little bit more than you want Inquisition, but against Show and Tell, you can him to Tourach them and take land number 4 in a Grizzlebrand, and they still have everything that they need. So that's why I'm playing 6 ways to take exactly what I want, as opposed to playing no Inquisitions and playing just Thoughtseize and him. I used to play a lot more Lightning Bolts, but I'm playing the Punishing Fire version of this deck. Jund didn't always used to play Punishing Fire. I still like to play 1 Lightning Bolt just kind of as it's a nice sort of safety blanket to have. I used to run 4 Abrupt Decay. I don't know if that's the correct choice anymore because Counterbalance no longer exists. I run 3 Punishing Fire, and again, that could be 4 Punishing Fire if you want to, these are kind of the 2 flex slots that I would say if you want to play a little bit more cheap removal. So I like Chandra, but I'll admit that it's a little bit biased, and, I like to be a little bit more prepared for the long game, but you can easily have this be Abrupt Decay number 4 and Punishing Fire number 4, Lightning Bolt number 2 if you want to, build it that way. Not going to get too much into the creatures. Deathrite Shaman is pretty self-explanatory. It's a way to ramp you if there's any fetch lands or wastelands in the graveyard, and then it's a legitimate win condition where you can, for the next couple of turns, exile sorcery as an instant from your opponent's graveyard. Tarmogoyf, it's a self-explanatory creature. Dark Confidant, it's a little bit self-explanatory. The only reason I would say I'm going to give a little bit more detail on it is Dark Confidant does not draw you cards. So I do have a Chains of Mephistopheles in my sideboard, and Dark Confidant and Chains of Mephistopheles do in fact interact with each other. So yeah, just again, if anybody plays any cards that say so Dark Confidant does get around Leovold because you're not drawing cards, you're revealing and then putting it into your hand. Bloodbraid Elf, it's another pretty self-explanatory card. It has Cascade, and so you're going to cascade into something that costs 3, 2, 1. I don't run anything that costs 0, so everything that it can cascade into is in one of these piles here. So that's a lot of cards it can cascade into when you think about it. I would say your best hits are going to be Liliana's and Tarmogoyf's. Up next is Chandra, Torture, Defiance, and, you know, I like it. It's a way to kill. It kind of does everything that a Lightning Bolt or an Abrupt Decay can do, plus a little bit more, which is one of the reasons why I'm running it. I am playing a 8th hand disruption spell, but I just really like this card. It really lets you sort of steal games away from like the check pile decks and just kind of run away with something that's extremely hard for them to interact with. Liliana the Veil, self-explanatory card. I think it's, you know, one of the mandatory 4-ofs. I would not play Punishing Jund with anything less than 4 Liliana the Veils. And the reason why Liliana the Veil and Punishing Fire work so well together is Punishing Fire kind of clears the really, you know, the cheap creatures, the Delver, Secrets, the Young Pyromancers, and then Liliana the Veil lets you take care of the big stuff like the Gurmag Anglers or the True Name Nemesis that kind of get to hang around after Punishing Fire has cleared away everything. Last but not least is Sylvan Library. I already kind of described how it went, so I'm not going to labor into that too much longer. Finally, I'm just going to give a little bit more thoughts on the sideboard and why I did, in fact, include them. I like to have Duress as a way to, again, interact with the sort of combo-based decks, or I don't know that I would bring it in against Force of Will decks, because typically Force of Will decks are going to be taking their Force of Wills out against you. So I would say only really bring this in against pure combo decks or like pure control decks. Pyroblasts are, again, self-explanatory. It lets you to counter or destroy a permanent that's blue, so you can counter Force of Wills or counter spells. You can also kill Delver's Secrets, any creature that has blue in its text box, or kill Jace the Mind Sculptors. Toxic Deluge, again, it's another just a self-explanatory sweeper. Engineered Explosives, again, it's the sort of same thing. So the last thing I want to go into is why Chains of Mephistopheles is such a good card. So it has a really long text box in here. But basically what the Oracle text is every time a player draws a card, if it is not the first card they draw on their draw step, what they have to do is they have to do a sort of workaround. So what you would do is, if they have no cards in their hand when they would draw a card that isn't one of their draw steps, instead what they do is they just mill. So here's sort of a quick how it works. We're going to pretend that this card here is Brainstorm, okay? So they have no cards in hand, and they cast a Brainstorm. That's typically not what we're going to do, but just for the purposes of this. You have a Chains of Mephistopheles in play, and you have a Brainstorm. All right. Is it the first card they've drawn this turn? No. So what they do is they would mill the first card of the draw 3 from the Brainstorm. Now we're going to go into the second card they draw. No cards in hand, so we're going to mill. Third card, a mill, and then we're going to resolve the rest of Brainstorm, put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library. They don't have any, so essentially now what Brainstorm is it just becomes mill 3 cards instead of draw 3 cards. So how does this work if they have cards in hand and they cast Brainstorm? So we're going to pretend that our opponent has 3 cards in hand and they cast Brainstorm. So our opponent casts Brainstorm, and now what it says is if they have a card in hand, they now have to discard a card from their hand, and then they get to draw a card. So they're going to discard a card, and they're going to draw. We're going to go to the second portion, or the second draw from Brainstorm, so they're going to discard a card and draw. Third portion of it, they're going to discard a card and draw. And now we're going to go to the put 2 cards from your library on top of your deck. So now what Brainstorm was just for them is discard 3 cards and then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library. So, you know, typically when you're casting brainstorms, you're digging for a very specific card, or like just any blue card to pair with your Force of Will. You can't do that unless you have 4 cards in hand. So Chains of Mephistopheles is just so punishing against Jace the Mind Sculptor, Brainstorm. It's also just very good at stopping your opponent that would, just get any incidental kind of draw from Ponders or just anything. Chains of Mephistopheles is a back-breaking card against those kinds of decks. So if you don't own Chains of Mephistopheles, I would say, again, my suggestions would be to play Choke, which is kind of does a similar but different thing against those decks, is you prevent them from even being able to cast future spells because you're tapping them their blue mana. My other suggestion would be to just play an additional Duress, or to play 4 Pyroblasts, because Pyroblasts are going to counter the Brainstorms that the Chains of Mephistopheles would be able to stop. The nice thing about Chains of Mephistopheles, though, is it interacts with board presence-based card draw. So, creatures that draw cards, Pyroblast doesn't necessarily interact with that, whereas Chains of Mephistopheles interact with anything. It interacts with like the draw card portion of, Sword of Fire and Ice. So again, Chains of Mephistopheles, it's like $800 or $900 to play these 2 cards. So, if you don't have $900 or you don't have 2 Chains of Mephistopheles, my suggestion would just be to play Pyroblasts, Duress, or Choke. All right, so that is my Legacy deck tech version of Jund. I hope everybody that is watching got to get a little bit of something out of it. The first 15 minutes was kind of my, here's the deck as it is, and then the last 20 minutes we got to go a little bit deeper into it. So I hope everybody enjoyed this video. Leave some comments letting me know if you like the format for how I'm doing these videos, and I hope to see you again soon with my next video. Take care.